Picture this. The moon hangs low over the ancient stone walls of a forgotten monastery, its pale light barely piercing the thick midnight mist. The only sound is the distant creak of rusted iron gates swaying in the wind, as if unseen hands push them back and forth. These sacred halls, once filled with prayer and devotion, now hold something far darker. Tonight, we step into the shadowy world of medieval monastic hauntings, where holy ground hides unholy secrets. Why do these sacred places harbor so many ghosts? The answer lies in their turbulent past, centuries of devotion, violence, and whispered sins trapped within cold stone walls. Some say the very prayers soaked into these buildings hold restless spirits in place. Others believe the monks themselves never truly left. Before this night is through, you'll hear of phantom processions marching through ruined cloisters, cursed relics that drive men to madness, and the echoing cries of those who met unnatural ends within these hallowed halls. These are not just ghost stories, they are fragments of history refusing to be forgotten. So light a candle, keep close to the fire, and prepare to uncover 25 of the most chilling tales ever whispered from the depths of medieval monasteries. The dead are waiting to speak. Now let us journey to the windswept cliffs of Yorkshire, where the crumbling ruins of Whitby Abbey stand sentinel over the North Sea. Here, one of England's most enduring ghost stories clings to the ancient stones, the tale of the Wailing nun. In the 12th century, Whitby Abbey was a place of unyielding discipline, where even minor transgressions could bring severe punishment. Among its shadowed halls, one young nun dared to break her sacred vows, falling in love with a local fisherman. When her secret was discovered, the abbey's merciless justice was swift. Rather than face public scandal, the abbess ordered her buried alive within the convent walls, her muffled pleas for mercy ignored as the earth swallowed her whole. Centuries later, visitors still report hearing her anguished sobs near the cloisters, especially on stormy nights when the wind howls like a grieving voice. Some claim to have seen a spectral figure in tattered robes, her face streaked with ghostly tears, wandering the moonlit ruins. One recent account tells of a couple who took shelter in the abbey's remains during a sudden downpour, only to freeze in terror as a woman's desperate weeping echoed from the empty air beside them, fading as quickly as it came. What makes this haunting so chilling isn't just the nun's tragic fate, it's the lingering sense of injustice, the feeling that her cries are not merely echoes of the past, but a plea that still hangs unanswered in the salt-laden air. But now, let's turn our gaze southwest to the mist-shrouded ruins of Glastonbury Abbey, where history and legend intertwine in the most haunting way. Here, as the first light of dawn creeps over the Somerset levels, witnesses have reported a sight that chills the blood, a silent procession of ghostly monks, their hooded figures gliding through the crumbling arches as if caught in an eternal ritual. Glastonbury's ties to the supernatural run deep, woven into the very fabric of its past, long revered as the mythical Isle of Avalon, where King Arthur was said to be laid to rest. The abbey's spiritual significance only grew over centuries. But its peace was shattered in the 1500s when King Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries brought violence to its halls. Monks were dragged from their prayers, treasures looted, and the great church left to decay. Many believe this trauma imprinted itself on the stones, giving rise to the spectral procession, a mournful reenactment of the last monk's final prayers before their home was torn from them. Photographers and visitors alike have claimed to capture shadowy figures in their shots, blurred shapes that defy explanation. One particularly striking image, taken at sunrise, shows a row of faint, robed silhouettes near the abbey's high altar, though no living soul stood there when the photo was snapped. Others speak of a low, rhythmic chanting that fades as quickly as it arises, leaving only the whisper of the wind through empty arches. What makes Glastonbury's ghosts so compelling isn't just their eerie persistence, it's the way they blur the line between history and myth, as if the abbey itself refuses to let its stories die. Whether echoes of Arthurian lore or remnants of Tudor brutality, these phantoms walk where the past feels unnervingly alive. Now, let's journey across the Channel to the Grand Abbey of Cluny in France, where ambition and damnation collide in a tale as old as temptation itself. Here, hidden among the towering shelves of the monastery's ancient library, lingers the restless spirit of an abbot who dared to bargain with darkness. Cluny Abbey was once the beating heart of medieval Christianity, its wealth and influence unmatched, but power, as it often does, bred whispers, especially about Abbot Hugh, a man whose sudden rise to prominence raised eyebrows even among his fellow monks. Rumors swirled that he'd secured his position through a pact with the devil, trading his soul for earthly glory. Medieval chronicles tell of midnight rituals in the library, where Hugh was said to have signed his name in a book bound in human skin, sealing his fate. When he died under mysterious circumstances, the Abbey's scholars claimed his shadow never left the stacks. Centuries later, visitors and researchers report eerie phenomena in that very library. Cold spots cling to certain aisles, defying the warmth of the sunlit halls. Some swear they've heard pages rustling when no one is there, or caught the faint, guttural murmur of Latin words too distorted to understand, yet unmistakably human. One archivist even claimed to see a gaunt figure in abbot's robes vanishing between the shelves, the air thick with the scent of old parchment and something darker like burnt sulfur. What makes this haunting so chilling isn't just the ghost, but the question it forces us to ask: was Abbot Hugh truly damned, or was he a victim of the envy his power inspired? Either way, his presence lingers, a cautionary tale etched into the very walls of Cluny's storied library. Now, let's turn our attention to the haunting landscapes of Yorkshire, where two monasteries stand as stark reminders of the past, each with its own spectral tragedy. First, we visit Fountains Abbey, a breathtaking ruin where history and horror intertwine. Here, among the crumbling arches and overgrown cloisters, wander the Headless monks, their restless spirits tied to one of the darkest chapters of medieval England. These ghostly figures are said to be the remnants of a brutal Viking raid in the 9th century, when marauders stormed the abbey, slaughtering the monks and severing their heads as trophies. Visitors today report shadowy figures gliding through the nave, their necks ending abruptly in darkness, as if the violence of that day never truly ended. Some claim to hear faint chanting cut short by the sound of steel, while others feel an icy grip on their shoulders only to turn and find no one there. The Headless monks don't speak, but their presence screams of unfinished business, a grisly echo of a time when faith was no shield against savagery. Just a short journey away lies Revolks Abbey, where a different kind of sorrow lingers. In a small, isolated cell, the air grows heavy with despair, a palpable weight that presses down on anyone who steps inside. This is where a young monk, broken by guilt or grief, took his own life centuries ago. Unlike the violent specters of Fountains, this ghost doesn't roam. Instead, it clings to the very stones of the cell, radiating a sadness so deep it's been known to reduce visitors to tears. Some say they've seen a figure slumped in the corner, rope still around its neck, while others simply feel an overwhelming urge to flee, as if the monk's anguish is contagious. What makes these hauntings so compelling is their contrast, one born of external brutality, the other of internal torment. At Fountains, the ghosts are relics of a violent invasion, their tragedy inflicted upon them. At Revolks, the tragedy is self-made, a private agony that refuses to fade. Together, they remind us that the past leaves more than ruins behind. It leaves echoes, some loud with rage, others whispering in despair. Moving from the sorrowful echoes of Yorkshire, we now step onto the blood-stained grounds of Battle Abbey, where history and the supernatural collide in a way that chills the bones. This is the very spot where King Harold II met his gruesome end during the Battle of Hastings in 1066, and legend claims the stones themselves refuse to forget. The abbey was built by William the Conqueror as an act of penance for the slaughter, but instead of bringing peace, it seems to have trapped the restless souls of that fateful day. Visitors report dark, rust-colored stains on the floor of the Abbey ruins, stains that no amount of scrubbing can remove. Some say these marks appear fresh, as if the blood still seeps from the earth, while others claim they shift position when no one is looking. Infrared cameras have captured strange thermal readings in these spots, showing unexplained cold patches that defy logic, as if the stones themselves are holding onto the anguish of the fallen. But the hauntings don't stop there. Ghostly soldiers have been seen reenacting the battle's final moments, their spectral forms clashing in silence before vanishing into the mist. Others hear the distant screams of dying men or the eerie clatter of arrows striking shield, sounds that shouldn't exist centuries later. The most unsettling accounts come from those who have felt an invisible force push them near the spot where Harold fell, as if the past refuses to let go. What makes Battle Abbey so uniquely haunted isn't just the violence that happened here, it's the guilt that built it. The Abbey's very foundation is soaked in remorse, and that energy lingers, replaying the battle like a broken record. Whether it's the stains, the sounds, or the unseen hands that shove visitors, one thing is clear: some wounds never heal, and some battles never truly end. Leaving behind the blood-soaked echoes of Battle Abbey, we now journey to the windswept shores of Lindisfarne, an island where the very air seems to hum with sacred sorrow. Known as the Holy Island, Lindisfarne was once a beacon of faith, a place where monks lived in quiet devotion until the year 793, when Viking raiders descended in a storm of violence. The massacre was so brutal that it marked the beginning of the Viking Age in England, and to this day the island refuses to let its dead rest in silence. On stormy nights when the North Sea rages against the cliffs, visitors report hearing something impossible: the haunting strains of Gregorian chants rising above the wind. These ghostly hymns are said to come from the ruined priory where the slaughtered monks once prayed. The melodies are unmistakably medieval, yet no living throat could produce them, no human choir could harmonize with such eerie perfection. Some who have heard the singing describe it as beautiful, almost divine, while others feel an overwhelming sense of dread, as if the voices are warning of some unseen danger. Lindisfarne's isolation only deepens the mystery. Cut off from the mainland by treacherous tides, the island becomes a world unto itself where the past feels unnervingly close. Locals whisper that the monks' spirits are trapped here, forever repeating their final prayers as penance for failing to protect their sanctuary. Modern recordings of these phantom choirs have captured faint, otherworldly vocals, though skeptics argue it's just the wind howling through the ruins. But those who have stood in the priory at midnight, listening to the harmonies swell and fade, know better. What makes Lindisfarne's hauntings so chilling isn't just the violence of its history, it's the contrast between its peace and its pain. By day, the island is a place of quiet beauty. By night, it becomes a stage for echoes of a tragedy 1,000 years old. Whether the chants are a plea for remembrance or a lament for what was lost, one thing is certain: on Lindisfarne, the past still sings. From the ghostly hymns of Lindisfarne, we now cross the English Channel to the towering Abbey of St Michel, where a different kind of horror lies hidden beneath its sacred walls. Here, in the shadowy crypt, rests one of the most infamous relics in medieval history, a mummified finger said to be possessed by a demon. This grotesque artifact, displayed in a glass case for centuries, has a reputation so terrifying that even the bravest visitors have been known to collapse at the sight of it. The story begins with the medieval obsession with relics, fragments of saints or holy objects believed to hold divine power. Monasteries like St Michel competed fiercely to acquire these treasures as they drew pilgrims and their donations from across Europe. But not all relics were what they seemed. Some were fakes, while others, like this finger, carried something far darker. According to Abbey records, the digit was brought back by a crusading knight who claimed it belonged to a saint. Yet from the moment it arrived, monks reported nightmares, unexplained illnesses, and whispers in the dead of night. Desperate, the abbot called for an exorcism. Medieval manuscripts describe a harrowing 3-day ritual where holy water boiled upon touching the finger, and the air filled with the stench of sulfur. Though the exorcism was declared a success, the relic never lost its eerie aura. Even now, tourists describe sudden dizziness, visions of shadowy figures, or an overwhelming sense of dread when standing near it. One woman swore the finger twitched as she passed, while another fainted outright, waking only after being carried into daylight. What makes this relic so unsettling isn't just its grisly appearance, it's the unanswered question of its origin. Was it truly a saint's finger corrupted by evil, or something far older, something never meant to be disturbed? Mont St. Michel's tides may ebb and flow, but the relic's curse remains, a silent warning from the past. Leaving behind the cursed relic of Mont St. Michel, we journey now to the haunting ruins of San Galgano Abbey in Tuscany, where the line between holy ground and hellish spectacle blurs beneath the open sky. Unlike most monasteries with their intact roofs and echoing halls, San Galgano stands roofless, its Gothic arches framing only the heavens above, a fitting stage for the unholy drama said to replay here each midnight. According to local legend, the abbey's downfall began when a group of monks, lured by power and greed, turned to dark rituals. They abandoned their prayers for satanic rites, conducting black masses within these very walls. When their corruption was discovered, the earth itself rebelled. A violent storm tore off the roof, exposing their sins to God's judgment. Now their spirits are condemned to reenact their sacrilege eternally. Visitors speak of shadowy figures in tattered robes circling a phantom altar, their chants twisting into guttural growls. Some claim to smell burning incense laced with sulfur, while others report an invisible force pressing down on their chests, as if the weight of the monks' damnation still lingers. But San Galgano's horrors are tangled with another legend, one of purity rather than corruption. Just a short walk away stands the chapel of Montezippi, home to the real-life sword in the stone. Unlike King Arthur's myth, this blade was plunged into rock by the repentant knight Galgano Guidotti as a symbol of his renounced violence. The contrast is striking, a sword of peace standing mere steps from an abbey of eternal sin. Could the monks' corruption have been a backlash against such holiness? Or does the sword's presence somehow keep their restless spirits trapped within the ruins? The abbey's architecture deepens the unease. With no roof to contain sound, whispers seem to come from everywhere at once. Moonlight filters through skeletal arches, casting shifting shadows that mimic the ghostly procession. Even the wind takes on a voice, howling through empty windows like the cries of the damned. It's a place where the past feels unnervingly present, where every crumbling stone seems to whisper a warning about the cost of forsaking the light. Now, let's turn our attention to two haunting tales bound by the raw power of fire and water forces that shaped both life and death in medieval monasteries. First, we travel to Canterbury, where the ghost of a prior condemned for heresy still lingers in the shadows. Accused of defying church doctrine, he met a gruesome end at the stake, his final moments marked by flames and agony. But his story didn't end there. Visitors to the cathedral's crypt swear they felt a scorched, skeletal hand seize their ankles in the darkness, its grip searing like embers. Some even claim to smell burning flesh moments before the apparition vanishes, leaving behind a trail of blistered fingerprints on the stone floor. This isn't just a ghost, it's a remnant of fire's cruel justice, a spirit trapped in the element that consumed him. Meanwhile, along the misty banks of the river Wye near Tintern Abbey, a gentler but no less sorrowful spectre emerges from the water. A young novice, overwhelmed by the rigors of monastic life, is said to have drowned himself in the river's icy currents. Now, on moonlit nights, his sodden figure kneels by the shore, weeping silently into his hands. Fishermen have reported hearing his muffled sobs carried on the wind, while others have seen his reflection in the water, a face distorted by ripples, forever trapped between two worlds. Where fire brings violence, water brings sorrow. both elements claiming their victims in ways that mirror the extremes of monastic devotion. What makes these hauntings so chilling is how they embody the very forces that medieval monks sought to transcend. Fire purified heresy, while water symbolized both baptism and despair. The prior's charred hand and the novice's drowned spirit remind us that even in places of holiness, the natural world could be as merciless as the divine. And perhaps that's why these ghosts endure not just as warnings, but as echoes of the fragile line between faith and fury, between salvation and the abyss. As we move forward, keep these elemental contrasts in mind. They'll return in even darker forms as we uncover the plague-ridden shadows of Melrose Abbey, where the earth itself seems to remember the dead. But now, let's step into the chilling silence of Melrose Abbey, where the earth itself seems to whisper with the voices of the dead. Beneath its once sacred grounds lies a grim secret, a mass grave where countless victims of the Black Death were hastily buried, their bodies stacked without the dignity of proper rites. In the 14th century, as the plague ravaged Europe, monasteries like Melrose became both shelters and slaughterhouses, their halls filled with the dying and their courtyards turned into makeshift graves. The horror of those days lingers in the form of shadowy figures that drift along the abbey's crumbling walls, their shapes flickering like candle flames in the twilight. Visitors and researchers have captured eerie thermal images showing clusters of unexplained heat signatures, crowds where no living souls stand. Some believe these are the restless spirits of plague victims, denied last rites and condemned to wander in search of peace. Medieval tradition held that improper burials could trap souls between worlds, and the sheer scale of the plague's devastation meant many were buried without prayers, without names, without even a cross to mark their passing. What makes these apparitions so haunting isn't just their presence, but the sheer desperation they represent. The Black Death didn't just kill, it shattered communities, leaving survivors to bury their dead in terror and haste. The shadows of Melrose Abbey are more than ghosts, they're a testament to a time when death was so omnipresent, even the sacred couldn't escape its grip. And as the cold spots gather and the thermal cameras flicker, one question remains: are these spirits seeking solace, or are they a warning of what happens when the dead are forgotten? As we peel back another layer of history, prepare to encounter something far stranger, a shape-shifting creature lurking in the ruins of Byland Abbey, where the line between beast and demon blurs into nightmare. But before we leave the plague-haunted grounds of Melrose Abbey, let's turn our attention to a tale that twists the supernatural into something even more unsettling. In the shadowy ruins of Byland Abbey, visitors have reported encounters with a creature that defies explanation, a demonic rabbit, its eyes glowing with an unnatural light darting between the crumbling stones. This isn't just any ghostly apparition. Legends whisper that this creature was once a monk's familiar, a shape-shifting servant bound by dark magic. Medieval monasteries were no strangers to accusations of witchcraft. In an era where faith and fear walked hand in hand, any unusual behavior, especially among those sworn to piety, could spark rumors of demonic pacts. The idea of a monk consorting with a familiar, an animal spirit aiding in forbidden rituals, was enough to condemn a man to the flames. And Byland Abbey's so-called ghost bunny fits eerily into this folklore. Witnesses describe it vanishing into thin air or morphing into a shadowy human figure, as if the line between beast and demon has blurred entirely. The tales have only grown in the age of social media. TikTok videos claim to capture the creature's fleeting appearances, showing a pale rabbit with unnaturally long limbs darting across the ruins before disappearing into the mist. Skeptics dismiss it as a hoax or a trick of the light, but those who have felt its presence swear there's something malevolent in the way it watches, almost as if it's waiting. What makes this story so chilling isn't just the creature itself, but what it represents. In a place dedicated to God, the idea that darkness could take root, that a holy man might have fallen into forbidden arts, strikes at the heart of medieval fears. Was this rabbit truly a monk's cursed companion, or is it something older, something that prowled these ruins long before the Abbey stones were laid? Either way, Byland Abbey's shape-shifting phantom reminds us that in the Middle Ages, the line between the divine and the demonic was perilously thin. And now, as we step deeper into the labyrinth of monastic hauntings, prepare to face a relic of another kind, a bell whose tolling echoes with the weight of death itself. The suicide bell of Hales Abbey holds a curse that refuses to fade, and its story is one of the most macabre we've uncovered yet. Now we come to one of the most unsettling artifacts in monastic lore, the suicide bell of Hales Abbey. This isn't just any bell. Its very metal carries a dark history, forged from the noose of a hanged man by a monk whose desperation led him to break sacred taboos. In medieval England, metalwork was steeped in superstition. People believed objects retained the energy of their materials, and what could be more cursed than a rope that had taken a life? The bell's creator, a troubled monk named Brother Aldrich, reportedly melted down the noose's iron fittings during a time of famine, hoping its ominous power would protect the abbey. Instead, the opposite happened. Within weeks of its casting, the bell began tolling on its own, always at midnight, always in a slow, mournful rhythm. And each time it rang unbidden, someone within the abbey walls would die within days. A sickly elder, a novice who took a fatal fall, even Brother Aldrich himself, found hanged from the very bell rope he'd crafted. Centuries later, the curse lingers. Modern custodians at Hales Abbey swear the bell still sounds before tragedies. One caretaker, interviewed in 2019, described hearing its hollow knell while locking up for the night, only to learn the next morning that a visiting historian had collapsed from a heart attack hours later. Others report cold drafts near the bell tower, even in summer, and the faint smell of rusted iron when no metal is nearby. What makes this story so haunting isn't just the supernatural element, but the human tragedy behind it. Brother Aldrich's act, defying church law to harness forbidden power, reflects medieval fears about the blurred line between faith and forbidden knowledge. Was the bell truly cursed by the noose's metal, or did the monk's own guilt and despair seep into its casting? Either way, the suicide bell stands as a grim reminder that some echoes from the past refuse to fade. And as we move from cursed objects to tormented souls, our next tale takes us to the heart of medieval scholarship, where a sacred manuscript bleeds ink as if its very pages are alive with unfinished penance. The Possessed Manuscript of St. Gall awaits. Now we turn from cursed bells to a book that seems to harbor its own restless spirit, the Possessed Manuscript of St. Gall. This isn't just an ancient text, it's a 900-year-old codex that allegedly bleeds when opened, as if the parchment itself is weeping. Housed in Switzerland's St. Gall Abbey, this medieval manuscript contains prayers and theological debates, but its most shocking feature isn't the words. It's the eerie red stains that appear on its pages, resembling fresh blood. The controversy begins with the manuscript's contents. Some scholars believe it includes suppressed writings about a monk who committed heresy, then vanished without confession. Others claim the stains first appeared after a 15th century abbot tried to erase certain passages, as if the ink itself resisted being silenced. But the real mystery lies in the modern era. During a restoration project in 2012, conservators reported waking from identical nightmares, visions of a hooded figure whispering in Latin, demanding the book be closed. One technician even claimed the stains darkened when exposed to UV light, as if reacting to the examination. What could explain these phenomena? Skeptics point to rare iron-based inks that oxidize over centuries, creating rust-colored marks. Yet no chemical analysis fully accounts for the way the stains seem to spread, or why those who handle the manuscript often describe sudden chills. Local legend insists the book is a prison for a soul denied last rites, its pages a purgatory where ink and blood intertwine. Whether you believe in curses or chemistry, the Possessed Manuscript forces us to confront medieval beliefs about the power of words. and the terrifying idea that some truths refuse to stay buried. And as we leave behind haunted texts, our next journey takes us into the realm of bone-chilling relics, where skulls scream and skeletons move on their own. The screaming skull of Wardley and the Bone Chapel poltergeist await. Now we step into the shadowy world of ossuaries, where the dead refuse to rest quietly. First, let's uncover the chilling legend of the screaming skull of Wardley. Nestled in a small English church, this ancient skull is said to let out an unearthly shriek whenever anyone tries to remove it from its alcove. Locals claim it belonged to a medieval monk who vowed to protect the church even in death. Over the centuries, multiple attempts to relocate or bury the skull have ended in disaster. Reports of sudden storms, unexplained illnesses, and that piercing scream echoing through the chapel. Some say the sound is so visceral it leaves listeners trembling for days. Not far away in the Czech Republic lies Sedlec Ossuary, a chapel adorned with the bones of over 40,000 souls. But these aren't just decorative remains, they're active participants in one of Europe's most unsettling hauntings. Visitors and caretakers alike have witnessed bones shifting overnight, rearranging themselves into patterns no human hand could replicate. One particularly eerie account describes a stack of femurs collapsing into a perfect circle moments after a tourist joked about disturbing the dead. Why do bones seem to harbor such restless energy? Medieval memento mori traditions offer a clue. These practices, designed to remind the living of their mortality, often involve displaying skeletons as stark symbols of life's brevity. But in places like Wardley and Sedlec, it's as if the bones themselves absorbed that solemn purpose and now refuse to be ignored. Whether it's the screaming skull's defiant guardianship or the Bone Chapel's silent reshuffling, these sites force us to confront a haunting question: in the face of death, what truly rests in peace? And as we leave these macabre relics behind, our next stop takes us to Spain, where a doppelganger's appearance heralded a prior's mysterious demise. The doppelganger prior of Poblet awaits. Now we journey to the sun-baked hills of Catalonia, where the walls of Poblet Abbey hold a mystery that defies reason. Here in the 12th century, Prior Bernat was a man known for his piety and strict adherence to monastic routine until the day he was seen in two places at once. According to chronicles, while leading morning prayers in the chapel, he was simultaneously spotted kneeling in the abbey's vineyard by 3 separate witnesses. The accounts were so precise that even the prior's distinctive limp, a detail only his closest brethren knew, was noted in both locations. Within a week of these sightings, Prior Bernat was found dead in his cell, his face frozen in an expression of terror, though no mark of violence could be found on his body. This wasn't just a bizarre anomaly, it was a textbook case of doppelganger folklore, a phenomenon feared across medieval Europe as a harbinger of doom. From Norse sagas to German woodcuts, tales of one's double appearing signaled imminent death or catastrophe. Scholars believe these stories emerged from primal fears about identity and the soul's fragility. A surviving illumination in Poblet's archives shows the moment of the prior's uncanny duplication, with 2 identical figures flanking a crucifix, one robed in white for prayer, the other in brown for fieldwork. The artist even included a shadowy third figure lurking behind them, perhaps hinting at the malevolent force behind the omen. What makes Poblet's case unique is its monastic context. Unlike peasant superstitions, this was documented by educated clerics who debated whether it was divine warning or demonic trickery. Modern visitors still report fleeting glimpses of a limping monk near the vineyard, always at dawn, the same hour the original doppelganger appeared. Some say it's Prior Bernat, forever reenacting his final days, while others insist it's the doppelganger itself, still wandering in search of its vanished twin. As we leave this enigma of fractured identity behind, our path now leads to Ireland, where a different kind of hunger lingers beyond the grave. The hungry ghost of Clonmacnoise awaits. Crossing the Irish Sea, we arrive at the windswept ruins of Clonmacnoise, where an ancient craving still echoes through the mist. Here in the 6th century, Brother Mael Sechnel was infamous for his insatiable appetite, a grave sin in a monastery where fasting was sacred. While his brethren survived on meager rations of bread and water, Mael would sneak into the kitchens, devouring entire wheels of cheese and loaves meant for the poor. When he died choking on stolen meat during Lent, the abbot declared his soul too gluttonous for heaven, condemning him to wander the graveyard, forever begging for scraps. This tale taps into Ireland's deep-seated famine lore, where hunger wasn't just physical but spiritual. Medieval texts describe Neam Merb, or hungry ghosts, souls trapped by earthly vices. What makes Mael's story unique is its monastic twist. His punishment mirrored the very asceticism he flouted, eternally craving what he could never digest, just as monks denied themselves earthly pleasures for divine reward. Centuries later, visitors still report a gaunt figure in tattered robes near Mael's weathered grave slab, hands outstretched. Locals leave offerings of bread or apples to placate him, a practice blending old Celtic traditions with Christian mercy. Some say the gifts vanish by dawn, while others claim they rot unnaturally fast, as if consumed by something beyond the living. Archaeologists even found modern coins pressed into the grave's cracks, a stark reminder that hunger, in all its forms, never truly fades. From this land of eternal want, we now turn to a different kind of appetite, not for food but for power. The witch's curse of Melk Abbey awaits. Leaving behind the hungry ghost of Clonmacnoise, we journey now to the opulent halls of Melk Abbey in Austria, where beauty and terror intertwine beneath gilded ceilings. This Baroque masterpiece hides a dark secret within its frescoed walls, the curse of a woman condemned as a witch. In the year 1683, a local healer named Agnes was accused of poisoning livestock and cursing children after a series of unexplained deaths near the monastery. Despite her pleas of innocence, the abbot authorized her trial under the watchful eye of the church. As flames engulfed the pyre, Agnes is said to have screamed a final prophecy. "These walls will weep as I have wept, and your gold will turn to ash in your mouths." Within weeks, several monks fell violently ill, their throats swelling shut as if choked by invisible hands. The abbey's prized fresco of St. Benedict, the very courtroom where Agnes was sentenced, began to darken unnaturally, its colors bleeding like old wounds. Restoration attempts failed spectacularly. Brushes snapped, pigments curdled, and one restorer reportedly woke to find his tools melted into twisted lumps. What makes this haunting particularly chilling is its historical context. Witch trials near monasteries were rare but brutal, often fueled by superstition and land disputes. Melk's records reveal that Agnes's family owned fertile fields the abbey coveted, a motive buried beneath pious accusations. Today, guides point to the cursed fresco, its once vibrant blues now murky brown, where visitors claim to hear whispers in Agnes's distinctive dialect. Thermal scans show a persistent cold spot directly before the painting, as if something lingers there, waiting. From this tale of artistic damnation, we turn next to a voice out of time, a choir boy whose song bridges centuries in the echoing vaults of Salisbury. Now let's step into the hallowed echoes of Salisbury Cathedral, where time itself seems to fray at the edges. Here, visitors and clergy alike have reported an impossible sound, a boy's voice singing plainsong, the hauntingly simple chants of medieval worship, as if drifting straight from the 14th century. The descriptions are eerily consistent, a high, clear voice untouched by modern inflection, singing Latin verses that haven't been used in centuries. Some claim to hear it near the choir stalls at twilight, while others insist it emanates from the very stones of the triforium, as though the cathedral's bones remember their past. What makes this phenomenon so compelling is the science behind it. Acoustic archaeology suggests that certain architectural spaces like Salisbury's meticulously designed nave can act as sonic time capsules. The cathedral's soaring vaults and precise proportions may create standing waves, trapping and replaying sounds under specific conditions. Think of it like a musical fingerprint pressed into the walls, waiting for the right moment to resonate again. Researchers have even experimented with playing medieval chants in the space, only to hear them linger far longer than physics should allow. But the most chilling evidence comes from an electronic voice phenomena recording captured during a quiet evensong service. Amid the muffled rustles of prayer books, a child's voice suddenly rises, singing a hymn so ancient, its lyrics were lost to time until a musicologist matched it to a fragment of a 14th century manuscript. Skeptics argue it's an elaborate hoax or a trick of acoustics, yet no one can explain why the voice always sings in perfect Gregorian mode, a style no modern choirboy is trained to replicate. Could this be the ghost of a young chorister forever bound to his sacred duty, or is Salisbury Cathedral, with its layers of history and faith, somehow bending time itself? As we ponder these questions, our next tale plunges us into even deeper mysteries, where holy water turns to blood and statues weep in warning. Now we turn to two of the most unsettling liquid mysteries in monastic lore, where the boundaries between miracle and omen blur. First, the blood fountain of Villers Abbey in Belgium, where a natural spring runs clear for most of the year except on the anniversary of the abbey's destruction during the French Revolution. Witnesses describe the water darkening to a deep crimson, as if the very earth mourns the violence of that day. Scientists have tested the phenomenon, finding no algae or mineral traces to explain the color, leaving locals to whisper that the fountain weeps for the martyred monks who once tended its waters. Then there's the Weeping Madonna of Batalha Monastery in Portugal, a serene stone statue that allegedly sheds tears of blood during times of crisis. Pilgrims first noticed the phenomenon during a 16th century plague, and it's recurred before wars, famines, and even the Great Lisbon earthquake of 1755. Forensic analysis of the reddish stains revealed human blood type, though no cracks or ducts exist in the statue to explain its origin. Skeptics dismiss it as clever hoaxes, yet the timing, always during disasters, chills even the most rational observers. What sets these tales apart is their duality. The blood fountain feels like a ghostly echo, a supernatural scar left by history, but the Weeping Madonna. Many believers see her as a divine alarm bell, a celestial mother warning her children of impending sorrow. Whether you view them as spectral residue or sacred signals, both remind us that monasteries were never just stone and mortar. They're vessels for the inexplicable, where even water can carry whispers from beyond. As we wade deeper into these mysteries, our final tales confront the most terrifying guardians of monastic secrets. Now we descend into the shadowy depths of Montserrat Abbey in Spain, where an altogether more sinister presence lingers. Beneath the soaring arches of this mountain monastery, visitors report encounters with a hooded figure who emerges from the catacombs without warning. Unlike the mournful spirits we've met so far, this entity doesn't wail or weep, it questions. Those who have crossed its path describe being subjected to intense, almost clinical interrogations in archaic Spanish, as if their very souls were on trial. One terrified tourist claimed the figure demanded to know if they'd ever betrayed their faith, its hollow voice echoing off the ancient stone walls. This spectral inquisitor isn't just random horror, it's history repeating itself. During the Spanish Inquisition, monasteries like Montserrat often served as covert interrogation centers. Suspected heretics would be brought to these secluded spaces, far from prying eyes, where questioning could turn brutal. The Abbey's records even mention a particularly zealous inquisitor who vanished in the catacombs after a prisoner's mysterious death. Some say his obsession with rooting out sin trapped him there eternally, doomed to continue his grim work. A chilling piece of evidence surfaced last year when a German backpacker, unaware of the legends, sketched the robed figure they'd encountered. The drawing, now viral online, shows a gaunt face peering from beneath a hood, one skeletal finger raised in accusation. Art historians note its uncanny resemblance to 15th century Inquisition portraits. Whether you believe it's a ghost or a collective nightmare, one thing's certain: Montserrat's catacombs hold more than just bones. They guard the echoes of an era when faith and fear were inseparable, and some wounds never heal. As we approach our final tale, prepare for a haunting that strips away all hope of peace. Our journey through these haunted halls brings us at last to the Basilica of Vézelay in France, where sorrow lingers in the very stones. Here, visitors whisper of a ghostly monk condemned to an eternal act of penance, crawling on his knees up the basilica's steps, only to vanish before reaching the top. The sound of his ragged breathing and the scrape of his robes against stone have sent chills down the spines of pilgrims for centuries. This tormented soul isn't just another spectral figure. He embodies the medieval terror of purgatory. In the Middle Ages, purgatory was seen as a temporary state of suffering where souls atoned for sins before entering heaven. Some believed that particularly grave offenses required extreme acts of penance even beyond death. The monk of Vézelay, it's said, committed an unforgivable betrayal, perhaps breaking his sacred vows or failing in his duty to God. Now he repeats his agonizing climb, a punishment as endless as it is heartbreaking. The steps themselves bear eerie witness to his torment. Centuries of wear show grooves where countless pilgrims have knelt in prayer, but one set of marks stands out deeper, more pronounced, as if carved by something beyond time. Restoration teams have noted these grooves defy normal erosion patterns, wearing down in ways that baffle experts. Some claim they've seen the stones glisten with phantom tears after rain, though skeptics dismiss it as trickling water. As night falls over Vézelay, the basilica's shadows seem to hold their breath. Whether this ghost is a divine lesson, a trapped soul, or simply a story passed down through generations, one truth remains: some burdens are too heavy to lay down even in death. And so, the penitent monk climbs on, a silent reminder of the weight of guilt and the price of redemption. With that, we close our tour of these haunted monasteries, but their stories linger, whispering through the ruins and echoing in the dark. What other secrets might these ancient walls hold? That's a mystery for another night. As we step back from these shadowed cloisters and crumbling chapels, let's take one final look at the echoes of the past that refuse to fade. From the wailing nun of Whitby Abbey to the eternal penitent of Vézelay, each tale we've uncovered is more than just a ghost story. It's a window into the fears, beliefs, and tragedies of medieval life. These monasteries, built as sanctuaries of faith, became vessels for something darker, where the weight of history lingers in every stone. Why do these sacred spaces harbor so many hauntings? Perhaps it's their isolation, perched on windswept cliffs or hidden in deep forests where silence amplifies every whisper. Or maybe it's their turbulent histories, raided by Vikings, dissolved by kings, or scarred by plagues, leaving behind unresolved pain. Some say the very sanctity of these places makes them magnets for restless spirits, as if the boundary between our world and the next grows thin where prayers once rose like smoke. Whatever the reason, these stories remind us that the past is never truly buried. The next time you walk through an ancient abbey, listen closely. You might hear the faintest chant on the wind, feel an unseen gaze, or catch a flicker of movement in the corner of your eye. And if you do, remember, you're not just visiting ruins, you're stepping into a story centuries in the making. Have you ever encountered something unexplained in these haunted halls? Share your experiences in the comments below. We'd love to hear them. And if you're brave enough to explore these sites yourself, tread lightly, respect the dead, honor the history, and who knows, you might just leave with a ghostly tale of your own. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more journeys into the unknown, and hit that notification bell so you never miss a spine-tingling story. Until next time, keep your lanterns lit and your curiosity alive. The past is waiting.